Hello and welcome to Urban TV. I'm Olivia Round. Today I'm here at the Clark Hopkins Clark Studio in Melbourne, and I'm joined by Jordan Curran, who's going to be speaking to me about the future of mixed-use precinct design in Australia. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So, would you mind telling us a bit about your role within the company and I guess which area of design you specialise in?
Yes, I'm one of the Clark Hopkins Clark. We've been around for nearly 60 years. We've always had quite a strong sort of social community focus as a practice, but probably the last 5 or 10 years we've really transitioned to kind of the next generation of partners. So we've really tried to strengthen our focus on, sustainable community focused places. But myself, I lead a lot of the design, master planning, sort of front end elements in the retail mixed use space, which is quite an interesting area because it's not just retail mixed use. 5 years ago was purely just retail shopping centres.
And I guess on that, what is Clark Hopkins Clark's vision for the future of mixed-use precinct developments in Australia?
So for us, a really good mixed-use precinct is a parent dropping their kids off to a childcare centre, going downstairs to the coffee shop, and then they might be able to walk, say, 20 metres to their office building and go to work for the day. But they'll be bumping into lots of different people along the way. So a true mixed-use precinct is we've kind of got everything at your doorstep. You bring lots of different elements together.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a really lovely lifestyle. But do you think Australia is ready to move from the quarter-acre section to these new precincts?
I think definitely apartment living is, for the last couple of years, it's almost been a bit more of a financial decision. But I think now, because people are focusing much more on these high quality mixed use spaces, that it's more of a lifestyle decision now. So we're looking at projects above train stations, essentially. So there'll be TODs, they're called, transit orientated developments. So you'll have a shopping centre, you'll have a village square, apartments, aged care facilities, vertical gardens, all directly above a train station.
Wow.
So you almost challenge the notion, do you actually need a car? We'll provide a huge amount of bicycle parking. So we're really creating the opportunity where it can be, previously that would have just been unused land.
Do you feel like councils and I guess the government are on board with that initiative?
Yeah, I think they're definitely changing, and it's interesting how the dialogue has changed over the last few years, where they're all talking about place making, creating civic spaces for communities, all around infrastructure. They understand the key elements that everyone's talking about, providing high quality infrastructure from day one, but also supporting and really trying to foster this sense of community, bringing people together and moving away from, especially growth suburbs, the 70s silos where it was just houses, no civic spaces, no libraries, none of those fine grain elements that actually bring communities together. So I think the dialogue is definitely changing, but yeah, there's still quite a long way to go for councils as well to actually implement those things.
Right. And so with the rise of technology and I guess things like online shopping, how is that changing the retail space in terms of design?
Yeah, retail has changed dramatically, especially since the advent of the iPhone. You can always pick the point when the iPhone was released. That's when retail, in terms of bricks and mortar shopping centres, changed from that day. And it's a real challenge because you're designing shopping centres. You go through the planning process. The first shopping centre I designed that I worked on, I was a student, and then when it was finally built, I was a partner of Clark Hopkins Clark. So it shows you the length of time of like 10 years that it takes to get something master planned and built. So you really need to ingrain flexibility into all the spaces that you design because technology can move so quickly. Bricks and mortar spaces can't. So if you've got that flexibility in there for tenants, they can grow and change. So we're trying to look at some interesting models where we can almost provide a bit of a hybrid and tick both boxes for online shopping, so where they've still got a physical space, which might be a bit more of a warehouse, a customer fulfillment centre, we call it, that's connected to a shopping centre. So they become almost like bricks and mortar and online shopping hubs. They become really attractive for lots of people to come there.
And Absolutely. That's really interesting. And so are there many challenges that come with designing these kind of spaces?
Definitely, and definitely in terms of what the unique element is for each shopping centre. We always say to our clients, so you really need to think what's your unique element, what's your unique offering to the market, while ticking all the other boxes of convenience, people-focused space, but what's the unique thing that you're offering to your local community to actually continually bring people back. And if you have a focus on people, we always believe, creating that really special place for people, then that'll give you that kind of long-term element that you're always going to attract people back to your shopping centre.
Definitely. And I know there's new offerings for apartment living, like shared facilities, including car sharing, which is really cool. What are some other new advancements that you're working on at the moment?
We're working on one of the Nightingale projects, which is a really innovative residential way of living, essentially, and it shows the demand for Nightingale developments where essentially you're buying more into a community than just a building. So there's shared spaces like laundries, big focus on bicycle parking as opposed to vehicular parking. So which is a really interesting model and a model that lots of developers are starting to look at moving forward. But a big one as well is looking at build to rent models. That's really about providing flexibility in the market. So if people can't afford to buy a house, they can almost start to partner up with a developer, and they're both long-term committed to either paying off an apartment that they're living, or might have a subsidised rent, so they don't need to live out in the burbs in a cheaper location. They can live directly in the middle of town and have everything at their doorstep.
That's really interesting. Does that mean that they have the freedom to customise their apartment as they want? They can paint the walls. Are you still a renter, or are you then an owner?
There's lots of different ways to look at the build to rent model, and lots of them are being tested in the market as well. But I think that customisation is quite a big one that developers are offering to tenants as well. Typically, customisation has kind of been a light scheme and a dark scheme. You get to choose one or the other. But now we're finding building flexibility into our apartment layouts, so you've got that sense of ownership of it from the start is a huge market that we're seeing happening and occurring as well.
Yeah. So I guess with design trends now, are there some that we're seeing currently that are likely to be phased out in future? From your perspective.
I think design is much more about people focused now. It's all about fine-grained detail. So in some ways, design is probably going back to a bit more of a tailored approach that we've seen traditionally. It's not a complete minimalist approach. People love to see exposed beams and really interesting signage elements and canopy details. Like, people are actually really interested in architecture and buildings now, which is actually a great thing. And I think for architects and developers, it really makes every project probably more difficult to deliver. We put a lot more time into our projects now than we ever used to, but that's a huge positive for the built environment, in Melbourne, Sydney, all of Australia, because it's a much more curated approach to each development.
Definitely. And so I'm aware that you've developed a methodology called Creating Vibrant Communities. So back to the idea of people as the main focus. Could you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so it's a book that Dean Landy, one of our partners at Clark Hopkins Clark, has been working on for the last couple of years, working on a lot of greenfield suburban sites. We've always had this real passion about designing spaces for people, but for developers, there's fine margins that they're working to. So we've always had to, you've kind of got to prove to them how financially it works, how there's a marketing appeal to it, and how by designing with people in mind, you attract a much broader market to their developments. So we started a research proposal about 5 years ago, really looking at spaces that were designed for people and how there was a benefit for the community, but then also the developer. So that led us to writing a whole book, huge amount of research and people that we interviewed for the book, from private developers to people like the Heart Foundation, Bicycle Victoria, who are doing a huge amount of really positive research in this space as well. And it's all about really trying to tease out what a long-term vision is for the precinct. So over, say, it might be 2 years, might be 5 years of the project. At the start, we've created a really strong vision and purpose for the development. So every decision that we make comes back to this strong creating vibrant communities vision that we've created at the start.
Wow, that's awesome. And with future planning in mind, could you tell us a little bit more about what you're working on with the students and I guess that mentoring program that you're running?
Yeah, so we've always had a really strong community focus, especially in the suburbs, as a part of our practice. Our original founder grew up in Eltham, and there was no school in Eltham 60 years ago.
Yeah.
So essentially got the community together and created a school, Eltham College.
Yeah.
And it was all that idea about innovation, thinking about their community. That's really the core of CHC and what we do. And that's kind of been implanted to all of the whole office. After growing up in Sydney, I had a really strong purpose and desire to start to give back as well, especially to the suburbs. So what we're looking at creating is almost like a mentor leadership program, and it's all about getting kids from suburban areas to really think big and think your dream just isn't in the suburbs. You can come up with any sort of goal and work towards it and achieve that. So we're looking at partnering up with a high school at the moment to actually deliver the program to senior kids. And it's all about getting them to think big picture, but then putting them together with business leaders and business groups who can actually help them to think big and achieve their goals as well.
What kind of businesses?
So lots of businesses. They might be big engineering firms, big development organisations. It might be the heads of those that kind of grew up in suburban areas as well. We've found that lots of private schools, you have this great support network that you can really start to rely on moving forward in business. Public schools, just from growing up in those, we feel that there's not necessarily that support network and alumni. So we're trying to bridge that gap between the two. But lots of, it could be people that run big landscaping firms, anyone that's got a focus on business, innovation and thinking big. We think there's potential there to connect and start to mentor some of these kids to really kind of push them out of their comfort zone and think, if they've got a vision, if they've got a dream, they can really achieve it in the future.
Absolutely. Well, that's really, really a fantastic initiative, and it's really exciting to see the future of urban development and what these kids can bring to the table, as well as companies like yours. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see Clark Hopkins Clark's projects that are coming up. And for all of those, check them out on urban.com.au. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much.